TellyCast, the TV industry news review.
Hi, I'm Justin Crosby, and welcome to this week's show. This week on TellyCast, we're previewing the World Congress of Science and Factual Producers with conference director Paul Lewis. Plus, how do you create the best TV soundtracks in the business? We find out with Peaky Blinders and SAS Rogue Heroes music supervisor Banijay's Amelia Hartley. It's all coming up on this week's TellyCast. My first guest this week is Paul Lewis, Conference Director for the World Congress of Science and Factual Producers, better known simply as Science Congress. Welcome to TellyCast, Paul. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Justin. Great to chat with you today.
And where are you speaking to us from today?
I'm actually in Toronto, but in a couple of weeks, less than a couple of weeks now, I'll be in sunny Glasgow.
That's right. Glasgow is the venue for Science Congress this year, and it's taking place from the 28th of November to the 1st of December. Possibly one of the last industry events to return to the circuit post-COVID. Tell us a little bit about Science Congress, because I think it's a really unique event, and I'm really interested to understand how it evolved and why it evolved the way it did.
Sure. Well, look, I think it's evolved just because the industry's evolved. And I've been there pretty much since the beginning. It was actually my very first international conference that I ever attended as an executive producer. So it's always been very dear to my heart. It started out as a small group of broadcasters, all involved in science programming, who decided it would be a smart idea to get together, pool resources, and co-produce together. And then producers got added into the mix, and distributors. And then over time, we've evolved to include as many different platforms, new genres like obviously history, natural history, crime, and other factual genres. So it has blossomed and grown and diversified, and now we've sold out our event this year. We're still taking people on a wait list. It's become, I'd say, a highlight for a lot of people because of the reasons are that it's quite distinctive from a lot of other industry events.
Why is it distinctive?
Well, a couple of reasons, I guess. First of all, we're in a different location every year. So that allows us to spotlight a different region. So this year, we'll have a couple sessions focused on Scotland, how to work with Scottish producers, the talent that's available in Scotland. We're also not exclusively a market. There's a lot of business deals get done, but we pride ourselves on the quality of the content and the sessions, the speakers. We have a lot of video in our sessions. They're very well produced by the community itself. It's also very casual, very relaxed kind of event. We'll have about 650 to 700 people at a typical Congress. So that allows for a lot more interaction with the decision makers and the commissioning editors. We are also very memorable for our social events and our networking opportunities. So this year we're celebrating the BBC's 100th birthday. BBC Studios is our lead sponsor. And we've got an event called Disco Inferno, Sounds of the Underground. Now, with a name like that, You've got to expect something pretty wild. And finally, I'd say it's a very member-driven organization. Once you register, you become a member. You have the ability to be on our editorial committee, to produce for our panels, and so on. And beyond all of the business side of things, we really hope that people come to get inspired, to learn about new innovations, and for career development. There's huge changes going on in the industry, and we're kind of want to make sure that we help guide people towards the future.
So it takes place in a different location. It's every year, right? Same time every year?
Pretty much the same time every year, depending on availability. It's been 16 years since we were in the UK, so long overdue. And of course, it's been 3 years since, as a community, we all got together.
That's quite unusual, isn't it? To create an event in a different location all over the world. by necessity, people are always going to have to travel. What's the background to that?
Well, you're right. I mean, it's incredibly complicated to organize an event remotely in a different location every year with different challenges and, that present themselves. The costs are always different each year. But we felt it was really important that as an international global organization that's member driven, that we should try and go to different locations where our members are. And of course, we pick up new members every time we do that. So traditionally, we've alternated between a location in UK or Europe and North America. But, we also go where the sponsors are. Over the last couple of years before the pandemic, we were in Brisbane, Australia, Tokyo, and so lots of exciting locations.
I remember coming to your edition in Stockholm, which was a fantastic event. Really enjoyable.
Yeah.
Feels like a long time ago that now. It's about probably about
It was. But it was very magical, though. I've got to say, we all joked about not seeing daylight for the entire time that we were there. There were some very memorable evening events, and Vienna the year before, where we had Vienna waltzing evening. In Stockholm, we had a chance to be in the room where the Nobel Prizes are handed out. So we always try for something special, and we will have something special in Scotland, but we just don't want to give it all away.
Am I right in saying that Hot Docs is involved in this, which is a Canadian business? First of all, tell us about Hot Docs and what its involvement in science congresses.
Sure. So Hot Docs is basically the event planner for Congress. So Hot Docs organizes all the, registration, communications, sponsorship, all of those kind of business side of it. And Congress, which is a separate organization, which is registered as a not-for-profit in the UK, handles the content. So I'm hired by Hot Docs to work with the Congress to create content. So Hot Docs, of course, organizes its own event in April, May, the International Documentary Festival. So they have the experience and the knowledge to put on a really great event. And it's worked very well as a partnership for many years. Hot Docs is based in Toronto, which is why I'm also in Toronto. So that's basically it. They do all the legwork, tough slogging, and I get to do all the fun, creative stuff, coming up with crazy session ideas that they all tell me will be logistically very difficult, but they get it done.
And so you work with an advisory committee, don't you, on the editorial side to pull all of these sessions together?
Correct. So there's a few things that we do. First of all, the editorial committee is kind of represents broadcasters, producers, distributors, digital from as many different parts of the world as we can bring together. It's quite a large editorial committee, about 20 people now, and we meet 3 or 4 times during the year, and I collect up all the ideas. In addition to that, do one-on-one Zoom calls. Zoom, of course, has opened up a whole new world to us over the last few years. So we talk to more than 100 people, I would say. We want to make sure that the session ideas are relevant and topical, and we really focus on making sure that we come up with a few surprise session ideas that get people thinking and laughing, arguing sometimes. So that's the goal. We want to be a little bit edgy in our content, and our members are a huge resource, and our editorial committee is incredibly important in pulling all of those ideas together.
As well as networks and distribution companies and producers that are amongst the delegates, you also have quite a few individuals from the scientific community, as you might expect, particularly as panelists.
Definitely panelists. We have a very unique session that is called the Ideas Salon that we have on our first day. 2 workshops. Basically, it brings scientists who are involved in leading edge, cutting edge research and science to meet with producers, and the scientists get to pitch their ideas to the production community as a way of bridging the gap between science, communication, and the work that we do in the media. And building those kinds of bridges is really important part of the philosophy behind Congress, between scientists and producers, between scientists in different regions of the world, between younger emerging producers and the veterans like us. It's really fascinating. We get a lot of sort of new energy, new ideas that way. And that just kind of gets everybody excited and enthusiastic.
My last question about the actual event itself is that if you're a factual producer and maybe you haven't been to Science Congress before, why should you go this year?
We're all kind of reinventing ourselves. There's a lot of new platforms, new opportunities out there. And now's the time to kind of start to rethink what we're doing. And so I think Congress this year is very much kind of focused on, we're beyond the pandemic. I won't say the pandemic's over, but we're moving beyond that. We're looking to the future. We're looking at fresh new ideas. How do we kind of place ourselves in this new world? And so just about all the sessions at Congress are focused on helping people navigate through this new world, this new reality, which is a lot more than just, well, now we're working from home. Last time we met, we were working from an office. I mean, I think that there have been some huge changes in our industry. So that's why I think people need to come. And also, to be honest, it's, the end of the year, have some fun. Get enthusiastic about what we do, get re-energized. That's kind of what Congress is all about.
And the event venue, this is at the SEC, isn't it?
Yeah, at the SEC Centre, that's correct.
Just over the water from BBC Scotland, of course.
Yeah, and we, in fact, will have a couple of sessions at the beginning at BBC. It's very convenient. It's a good location, and we're excited to be there. And we're excited to be in Glasgow. Perhaps when you're living in London, Glasgow doesn't seem terribly glamorous, but the Europeans and the North Americans especially are very excited to be coming. We have a lot of delegates heading over from Japan and HK as well. So I think it's a good place to just have a good time and listen to some bagpipes and drink some nice Scotch whiskey. So it's got a lot of good elements for a fun conference.
And now it's time for Story of the Week, where Paul gets to highlight the TV industry news that's caught his eye in the past 7 days. What's your story of the week, Paul?
Well, this may not on the surface seem industry related, but certainly caught my eye. And that's that China has started to ease its COVID restrictions, making it a lot easier now to allow foreigners to come into the country and travel around, which is a fascinating development given the fact that there's some major outbreaks still going on in China. And I think a good sign that the restrictions will continue to ease. For me personally, I think this is reopening that door to China is so important. There's a lot going on in China. There's a lot of amazing stories, especially for anyone that's interested in the factual world. It's become such an important global leader. There's a lot going on there. And there's a lot of really creative talent there. I mean, the stuff that's going on in China on the media side sometimes blows my mind. They're not just far advanced on the technical side with 5G and gaming, but also I would say on the creative side, I've seen some marvelous things there. Several years back, we had Bilibili, which is a digital streaming platform, come to our event and show us some of what they're doing, which included something called text bullets, which is while you're watching the screen, there's audience comments flying across the screen. You can't really perceive them at the beginning, but over time, apparently, you can start to read it. So they have this multi-layering content that I think is fascinating. So I think we got a lot to learn from what's going on in China. And I sure hope that they're able to start traveling again in the new year and come to some of our international events and participate.
They've been missing since pre-COVID, haven't they? And obviously, as you say, major international player. But I suppose for many people in the content industry, they're still trying to figure out a way of working effectively with China. I think probably when it comes to science and natural history, it's a lot more straightforward because a lot of the other sort of projects, there's so much censorship involved that really has a major impact when it comes to scripted or perhaps even just, wider factual programming can make it a little bit difficult. But as you say, when it comes to natural history and science programming, then presumably that's going to be a lot more straightforward.
Yeah, that's true. Travel, food is a huge topic of interest on Chinese media. So there's definitely topics there that are fairly neutral. And, if you're careful and you nurture relationships there, you start to anticipate what you can get away with and what you can't get away with. There's a different set of rules in China, absolutely, for sure. But I've done some, really personally, some really fun and interesting projects. They have some great documentary festivals in China as well. So we ignore them at our own peril and try and work with them. And as I say, it's a different way of working, but it can also be very successful.
Yeah, and we've just seen actually today President Biden and President Xi as well have met in person for the first time. So certainly for the first time that Biden's been president, hopefully that's going to thaw relations a little bit because the whole issue around Taiwan started to look a bit scary a few weeks ago, didn't it? But
it did. Well, there's so many scary things going on the planet. Wherever we can kind of create a understanding and cooperation, I think that we do have an opportunity to get some insight into some other cultures and break down those horrible stereotypes that we have about each other.
Paul, now it's time to find out your hero of the week and who or what you're telling to get in the bin. First of all, who's your hero of the week?
It would be a thing. And I got to say, this is my sort of secret passion, but it's a platform and it's TikTok. I love TikTok and I am totally obsessed with it. I think it's a fantastic platform for factual these days, great storytelling, short storytelling. And I've even actually found a couple speakers in the past for Congress through TikTok. There's a lot of great young talent there that's just kind of waiting to explode onto other mediums. So it's a lot of fun. I just really love TikTok. And for me, with Twitter going through all of the twisting itself in knots, trying to compete with other platforms, TikTok just seems very confident about what it is and what it's doing.
It seems to be going from strength to strength. And obviously, it's also originally a Chinese platform as well, isn't it?
Oh, that's true. That's true. There might be a theme coming along here.
TikTok's your hero of the week. Who or what's going in the bin?
This one didn't seem kind of obvious to me. I didn't want to come up with something that anybody else would come up with. So I'm going to throw into the garbage bin change, massive change. I'm exhausted. There's been too much disruption going on for the last few years, and I'd love to see things just kind of settle down for a little bit. Maybe over the holidays, we can all just take a deep breath, take a break. We've gone through COVID, we've gone through technological change, new platforms, the environment, the planet's burning up. All of these are complex problems. And, I can sort of understand why people just want to simplify their lives, and conspiracies make life a lot simple. This leaning towards individualism and libertarianism, it's just, hey, I just want to do what I want to do, and to hell with the consequences, and to hell with everybody else. Well, there's a little bit of that, but there's nothing wrong with just slowing the pace down a little bit, taking a few deep breaths. So that, to me, I just want to see change get thrown away just for a little bit. Give us a chance to catch up with what we've all had to get through the last 3 years.
Stop the world, I want to get off.
Exactly. I don't know where I'm going, maybe Mars. But I'd love to escape somewhere for a little bit.
Paul, you won't be escaping too far because obviously your event is in a couple of weeks' time.
Yes.
We look forward to seeing you at the Science Congress on the 28th of November through to the 1st of December. I'm going to be coming up for the first couple of days, and I'm hightailing it back down to London for the TellyCast Digital Content Forum as well. So there's a lot of events going on in the same week.
It's a busy time, and let's hide ourselves into a bottle of nice Scotch whiskey while you're there.
That sounds good. Okay,
That's
deal.
That's my escape. Okay.
It's a deal. Paul, lovely to speak to you. Good luck with all the planning for Science Congress. I'll see you in Glasgow.
Thanks so much for the time.
Now, a great soundtrack can completely transform and elevate a TV series, and my final guest this week has experience in doing just that. Welcome to TellyCast Peaky Blinders and SAS Rogue Heroes music supervisor, Amelia Hartley from Banijay. Amelia, welcome to TellyCast.
Oh, thank you very much. It's lovely to be here.
Well, it's lovely to chat with you. One of the great things about doing TellyCast is you meet loads of people in different environments, and we met at MIPCOM and we were having a chat about what you do and the role of a music supervisor, which I found really fascinating. Thanks for coming on and sharing a bit of info about that, because it's something that, that you don't really see and get to hear about, and it's a real art. I'd love to dig into it a little bit, and I'm a big fan of the shows that you've worked on. But before we talk about them, tell us about you and your career so far and how you got to be a music supervisor at Banijay.
I was always really into music, went to loads of gigs when I was younger, and my very first job was working for a tour management company, and we toured bands like Public Enemy and Ice Cube and Ice T and Cypress Hill. So that was a bit of a baptism of fire. And then I got a job at a TV production company called Initial that specialised in music events and television events. And so they asked me to be their in-house music supervisor. We did things like the Pepsi Chart Show and the Brit Awards and iTunes festivals. And then it sort of went from there. So Initial then got bought and then we got bought, and I ended up at Endemol and then Endemol Shine. And now I'm at Banijay, and I'm incredibly lucky to have got to work on some incredible projects whilst I've been here.
The role when you were working at Initial and working on like the Pepsi Chart Show, I mean, that's obviously different to what you're doing now when it's creating soundtracks and building amazing soundscapes for high budget dramas. So your role at Initial, was that just music clearance at that point, or was it more coordination with artists?
Whilst I was at Initial, I did take care of the music clearance side of things, but we did get involved creatively. I can remember, having lots of discussions with my boss, Malcolm, about what we were going to do on the Brit Awards and collaborations and things like that. So it was a sort of a slow burn really from there.
Right. And that's Malcolm Gary, isn't it?
Yeah, that is Malcolm Gary.
Bit of a legend in music TV in his own right. So you've obviously learned from the best there. The process of building a soundtrack, then, a great soundtrack can completely change the mood of a show, obviously. Can you take us through that process of how you go about putting, some really memorable moments together on TV shows? Then where does it start?
I think it starts with conversations with the creative team. So whether that's the writer, creator on something like Peaky, Stephen Knight, or on SAS Heroes, Tom Shankland was our director. And obviously he has an overall vision for how the show's going to look, what it's going to sound like. And so it's basically, I sort of chat with him and we sort of work our way towards coming up with a sort of aesthetic sound for the show.
What I've noticed in both of those shows, both Peaky Blinders and SAS Rogue Heroes, is that it's not just about big hits, is it? It's not about, getting the most popular shows in a particular genre to deliver a particular mood. There's some quite deep cuts as well that have been chosen there, and obviously chosen really, really carefully. Are those types of tracks easier or more difficult to license than some big name tracks, or does that not really come into it? Does it not really matter?
If you're dealing with a massive artist, obviously they're going to be much more challenging to get on board, because they are very careful about where their music's used. So you have to sort of talk to them about the project, what your vision is for that project creatively, and explain to them why you'd like them to be part of your sort of soundtrack. I suppose the smaller artists are easier to deal with, but it's still, quite a complex process.
Let's talk about SAS Rogue Heroes, for example, which is a lot of rock tracks. Some of them go back to the 70s and the 80s. And it's quite of a time, a lot of the tunes in that show. And, it's really sets the tone when AC/DC's If You Want Blood comes on right at the beginning of episode 1. And it just, it kind of sets the tone for the whole series at that point. Is that something that you discussed with the director at that point, saying, I know what would work really well, this particular track? Or do they give you an example of the tone and the feel that they want? Or do they give you a specific track that they love and they see being in the series? How does the actual process of each individual track being in the show, how does that come together?
Well, I think because the director, by the time we hit post, has filmed the show, they very much have a feeling of what they think would work and what they do. So someone like Tom explained to me that, aesthetically he was looking for sort of rock music for the really big sort of action scenes in SAS, and it really lends itself to that sort of style of music. And so then what happens is we just start sort of sending playlists around to sort of get that conversation going. So although there may be some key tracks that everybody's, that he's particularly sort of gone, God, I'd love some AC/DC, we're still working towards what would work best with picture. So at that point, whether it's the period songs or whether it's songs the Empire band was singing in the club or whether it's the rock tracks, everybody's just sort of, I'll send sort of playlists over and then they can have a look at them, see what what would work, what might not work.
When are you actually engaged on a big drama series like SAS Rogue Heroes?
Well, I come on at script stage. So basically what will happen is I'll get sent the scripts, then I'll read them, obviously get a feel for the editorial and the narrative, and then I'll do a music breakdown of the script. So I'll go through it and break it down to see what music uses there are, where there's references to music, where there might be music in the background, if any characters are singing, if there's any bands in pubs, that sort of thing. And so the first thing to do is to sort out on-set requirements. So the first thing we did on SAS was to put together some playlists for music that the swing band in the Empire Club might be playing. By this time, Tom and the art director are putting together visuals, so we're getting a kind of feel of what would be happening in the club. And so once we put those playlists together, I then engaged Egyptian musicians who then did the pre-records that we needed for the on-set filming.
This is a scene set in a club in Cairo, isn't it?
So yes, it's sort of like a very sort of avant-garde bacchanalian kind of club set in the 1941 in Cairo. And so the band had to reflect that sort of ostentatious, chaotic sort of feel.
You engaged some Egyptian musicians. So did they actually play? Are they miming over a track that you've already licensed, or how does that work?
Basically, the band went into a studio and did the pre-records of the tracks that we decided that we would like them to play, but in the style of a sort of Middle Eastern band that would have been in the club at the time. And then we used those tracks for playback whilst we were filming. And the musicians then went and obviously were put in costume and were mimed. They then were filmed miming to their own track.
Let's come and talk about some of the licensing in a second. But first, let's just have a listen to SAS Rogue Heroes.
I am bringing together men of a particular caliber. I've decided to form a parachute regiment.
This is the uniform of your new regiment, the SAS.
The war is in the balance.
Why do you want to fight in the desert, Dave?
Well, just looking on fascists, sir.
I am a long shot, but at least I am a shot. We will destroy more enemy airplanes on the ground than the RAF will destroy in the air.
Let the games begin.
Who dares wins, and we will continue to dare.
What are the chances of survival?
10%.
Welcome to the SAS.
It's amazing. So, it's an incredibly energetic and exciting soundtrack. I mentioned AC/DC earlier on. You very rarely hear a band as big as AC/DC in TV shows, actually, I think the last time I heard them involved in any sort of content was probably the Iron Man 2 soundtrack. How did that come about, choosing particular tracks from AC/DC? Was that easy to get that licensed?
Well, we were very lucky actually with SAS because we were using the BBC blankets to cover the music use. And the BBC has an exclusion list that operates for artists that you can't use, people like the Beatles. And AC/DC have been on that list for quite some time, but they recently came off it. So we were able to use them in the series, which was brilliant and amazing. And we hope they don't mind.
It really does, as I said, elevate the series. It's fantastic to hear it. So for tracks that aren't part of a blanket licensing agreement that broadcasters like the BBC have, how do you actually clear those tracks then? So do you need approvals from the publisher, the writer, and the label as well? Do you need sort of 3 rounds of approvals to use tracks that aren't covered by licenses?
Well, when we make Peaky Blinders, because of the Netflix transmission, we do clear directly with all of the bands and artists that we feature. I basically have to go to all the publishers who represent the writers and then all the record labels who represent the artists and explain to them what track we would like to use and what scene specifically we want to put it on. Because when you're doing drama, they want to know the exact scene and the context of use to see if they're happy with it and whether they like it. And then once that's sort of in place, you then negotiate fees.
And how does that work then when it comes to working with music publishers? Are they coming to you to say, you really need to use our tracks in your next big series? Or is it more a case of you, from an artistic perspective, approaching them and saying, this is the track, this is the scene, this is how it all works together? Is it, or is it a bit of both?
So the publishers and record companies do get in touch with me quite a lot to let me know what they've got coming out and sort of new repertoire. But obviously, if you're working on a specific drama that may have an aesthetic that, it doesn't fit what they're sending you, then a lot of the time we are just sourcing music ourselves and sending sort of playlists around to sort of discuss what that aesthetic is going to be to get towards a sort of coherent soundtrack.
As the music industry has changed over the last 20 years, obviously it's become much more focused on digital, and actually artists are now making the majority of their income from live touring. Has that meant that licensing music is easier? Are artists in general much keener to license their tracks?
Do you know what? The industry has changed incredibly. When I first started in about 1806, you couldn't get anybody to say yes to letting you sync their music in your show, and it was like £85 per 30 seconds on Channel 4, and it was all kind of I used to beg people to try to let me use stuff. But as the streamers have come on board, specifically, things have changed a lot, and things like the Kate Bush on Stranger Things has made it go through the roof, really. So a lot of people are much keener on getting syncs than they used to be, especially sort of artists who may have dropped off the sort of radar for the younger sort of TikTok generation. Added to that, if you're a big, massive artist, it means that actually they have become much more difficult to deal with because they're much more curious about what you're doing with their song and, what the outcome is going to be for them on your project.
Some artists, you mentioned Kate Bush. I mean, that's had a whole resurgence as Stranger Things has triggered whole new interest in Kate Bush. I mean, I was even watching the T20 Cricket World Cup final and I heard Kate Bush being played in the stadium. Now, that would have never happened. That track would never have been used in the stadium if it wasn't for Stranger Things. So that's just one example. It can really lead to a massive opportunity for artists as well, can't it?
It really can. I mean, if it's done well and it's a great use and the scene is brilliant, the music then massively enhances it and turns it into a proper moment. And that's what we're all sort of trying to achieve, I think, with our music use. But whatever sort of syncs you do, especially on things like something like Peaky Blinders before, all the artists that we use see spikes in their Spotify and sort of streaming.
Talking about Peaky Blinders, how's that developed? Because there's obviously been multiple seasons of the show, incredibly successful. How has the music approach differed and changed and evolved over the years?
I think that as the show has evolved and it's become more popular and the Shelby family has become more resonant with our viewers, the music's become a bigger and bigger thing because we're sort of soundtracking their experience of, watching and being with the Shelby family. As we've sort of evolved it over the series, we've just tried to do bigger and more interesting things for the viewers and for the fans, stuff that they would find more exciting, more interesting. So we're just trying to push it a bit as we've gone on.
And a good example of that is a collaboration you did with Tom York and one of his offshoots from Radiohead. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we were incredibly lucky, really, because actually Radiohead have been very kind to us and let us use quite a few of their tracks across the series on some really big key sort of scenes. And so we sort of had a relationship with Tom York and his wonderful manager, Brian Message. So as we came up towards this series, we started to have discussions with them about whether they could get a bit more involved with the series. Tom and Johnny Greenwood did score some of the cues for us, which was amazing. And we also used Panavision, which was, and a couple of other tracks with a smile. But with Panavision, we actually released the sequence in episode 6 as their official video for the single release, which was the first time we've ever done anything like that, and was great fun.
It looks fantastic, and I'll include a link in the episode description so everybody can go and have a look at that, because it's the most amazing sequence. Works incredibly well as a music video. So, that's a really good example of how an artist has benefited and also how Peaky Blinders has benefited as a show for that music. And that's a really nice example of a kind of, a nice marriage, really, isn't it, of the two?
Yeah, I think we benefited more, to be fair. I mean, we're very grateful that musicians like Tom York are, love what we're doing. And obviously a big shout out, obviously, to my director on that, Anthony Byrne, who's absolutely incredible.
Now, do you get to commission original music as well? You mentioned earlier on about the Egyptian band in SAS Rogue Heroes in that scene, but do you get to ever come up with original ideas and wouldn't it be great if so-and-so could do a cover of this or create an original piece of music for this scene? How often do you get involved in actually commissioning music?
It's quite a bit. I mean, it depends on the editorial and what the needs of the show are. I mean, on something like Peaky, we do covers of pre-existing songs. So, for example, Patti Smith did a cover of Red Right Hand for us this series, which was amazing because I'm a massive fan of hers. But I've just finished on a Amazon Christmas movie called Your Christmas or Mine with Asa Butterfield that's coming out shortly. And Maisie Peters very kindly did a original song for us for that. And so, as I said, it sort of depends what you need.
And now it's time for Story of the Week, where Amelia gets to highlight the TV industry story that's caught her eye in the past 7 days. Amelia, what's your Story of the Week?
So I just wanted to mention, obviously, this week the Christmas advert for John Lewis came out, and I'm very excited about it because it's always a signifier, a ritual that Christmas is coming. And it's got a brilliant use of the Blink-182 song, All the Sad Things, and it made me cry. But a lot of people have said that it's, it's too much and it's too, but I like it. I like the sentimentality of what the advertising industry do with their music. Yeah. It's completely different to the use of TV drama, I'd like to stress, but that was my favourite thing this week.
All right. Well, we'll put another link in the episode description to the John Lewis ad as well. You're right. I mean, that's become a sort of a seminal moment as we move towards Christmas. Every year, a lot of the supermarkets releasing their Christmas ads, and John Lewis has obviously become the front runner in that area. And now it's time for Hero of the Week and Get in the Bin. Amelia, who's your Hero of the Week?
Well, I'm going to say Joe Lycett for going on Twitter and saying that he was going to shred £10,000 if David Beckham went to Qatar for the World Cup. And he was very funny and just said that, he was going to lose his gay icon status. And I think he just used humour really well to make a good, valid point about actually, the human rights issues in Qatar.
I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? That's the worst World Cup. I mean, everybody realizes that it's wrong, really, but it's happening, and it's like this car crash in slow motion that everybody's saying, "What is everybody doing out in Qatar?" But yeah, and David Beckham's carefully crafted PR image over the last 20 years or so is slightly in danger. It'd be very interesting to see if he gives up his £10 million ambassadorial deal, which is what Joe Lycett's suggesting he does, or lose his gay icon status. He hasn't responded yet, has he?
No, I don't think so. We'll have to see what he does. I would imagine he's probably just going to completely ignore it.
Yeah, well, I suppose, the 10 million quid payday is going to be quite difficult to turn down. And how about get in the bin, Amelia? What's going in the bin this week?
Well, I'm sure I'm probably not the only person that thinks this, but I'm afraid I am going to have to say Matt Hancock.
Yes. For the second week running, Matt Hancock is still in the bin. And yeah, it's a bit strange, isn't it? I mean, it's compelling TV, though, isn't it?
This whole idea about I'm a celebrity, there's a sort of you see redemption stories on it, and it's, people doing terrible tasks, but it's sort of like a sort of uplifting sort of program, and a kind of like, I don't want to see the real Matt Hancock at all. And I found the whole thing incredibly distressing.
Yeah.
I just don't think the two things should mix, really, entertainment and everything that everybody went through in the COVID pandemic, really. So it's quite challenging to watch.
It does feel a bit uncomfortable. And also the fact that he's been voted to do these most unpleasant things. It's like the public's having its own back, making him lie down with loads of snakes and cockroaches and everything all over him, but maybe he's getting his just desserts, and everybody's having the opportunity to kind of get their own back in a tiny way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amelia, thank you so much for joining us on TellyCast. It's really interesting chatting about SAS, Rogue Heroes, soundtrack, and Peaky Blinders, and everything else you do. And are you working on anything that you can tell us about now, currently? You're working on the soundtrack for any new projects that have already been announced?
Yeah, I'm currently working on a couple of things. I'm working on The Sixth Commandment, which is a 4-part BBC drama starring Timothy Spall, and Three Little Birds, which is a Lenny Henry written 6-parter for ITV, which is following the story of 3 girls who come over in Windrush to start a new life, which was inspired by his mother. And they've both got great soundtracks on them. So they're both completely different, but the Three Little Birds soundtrack's brilliant. So I'm enjoying it.
Thanks a lot. Well, that's it for this week. Next week, we're previewing the TellyCast Digital Content Forum, sponsored by BBC Studios. A few tickets are still available for the event on the 30th of November at the BFI South Bank. Go to telecast.com/events to snap them up now. TellyCast was edited by Ian Chambers and recorded in London. Until next week, stay safe.